by my co-host, my partner in crime, Evan Dammerall. Evan, what's up, buddy?
Not a whole lot, man. The weather's getting a little nicer. It's a bit of a fool's winter right now. And speaking of fool, my allergy is acting the fools because of it. And no, but it's nice to have a little bit extra sunshine, a little extra vitamin D, kind of deal with some seasonal depression. But all things considered, not too bad. The Cavs wrap up their first half of the season tonight against the Indiana Pacers, so it's pretty exciting time. But how are you doing?
Doing good. So just for transparency's note, as Evan alluded to, that we're recording this on Wednesday. You're watching this on WKYC. We're listening to this on Thursday later in the day because we're going to have a recap episode of that game, and then this will come out after that. So we're just doing a little staggering this week due to the break in the schedule coming here. We'll obviously have much more on the first half of the season and what we can expect going forward on the show into the coming days. But Evan, we're going to first talk about rising stars before we get into the good and the bad of the All-Star game. So Darius Garland, does not make the Rising Stars roster. As people probably know, the All-Star game is happening this year in Atlanta. People could argue about context and there's snub or not. I'll mention something about that later on in this discussion, but going through this, it's obviously this game in itself is not happening. It is basically just honoring a bunch of young players in the league, and they are not playing because the All-Star game is condensed to a couple of things this year. It's very compressed. It's being held for money reasons, etc.
There's not any contractual obligations tied up with this, right? Because I know all-star picks and things like that and certain milestones for a player is like triggers for salary incentives. I don't think Rising Stars is.
I don't think so, and I hope to Lord that it's not, because it's already kind of nutty that All-Star game impacts your wages.
Players, so I guess technically they're on rookie contracts. So
we're on the rookie scale. It's like preset to draft position in a lot of ways. But Evan, so Darius Garland, as I noted, did not make the list. Here are the players on the USA roster that made it, that excluded him from making it. Charlotte's LaMelo Ball. Minnesota's Anthony Edwards, Sacramento's Tyrese Halliburton, Miami's Tyler Hero, Atlanta's DeAndre Hunter, San Antonio's Keldon Johnson, Memphis's John Morant, Denver's Michael Porter Jr., New Orleans is Zion Williamson, and Golden State's James Wiseman. Evan, I'm going to ask you this. How many players on that list do you think Darius should have been over? Who are the names on that list where you're like, okay, if you're going to say Darius, I think the way to do these exercises, whether it's all-star or this, is if you're going to say X player should be on, who are you knocking off to clear a spot for Darius Garland?
Well, I'd probably have to pick either. I mean, DeAndre Hunter's having a good season itself. He's averaging 17.2 points, 5.4 boards, 2.2 assists, but Atlanta's a little bit of a mess right now. My picks would either have to be him or Keldon Johnson, but a lot of these players are deserving in my eyes. And I know that a lot of Cavs fans, friend of the pod, Justin Rowett, is one of those people too, who is making a case for quite a few players that could be making the case for, or Garland should be making the case over. And like he said, Edwards, Halliburton, Harrow, I think Wiseman as well. But like all these players are having a strong case. And I just think this is more indicative of the fact that the NBA needs to stop doing Team USA versus the world, which I know is a fun premise, but they're kind of reaching the bottom of the barrel a little bit for some of these world players. Like Chris and I were talking about this before we started recording, but Facundo Campazzo for the Denver Nuggets is older than both Chris and I, and he's technically a rookie, and he's on the world team for this.
And we're old. We're old people. Yeah.
I'm 2 years away from 30, and Campazzo is 30 years old, so let's just put it that way. But I think if the NBA went back to a rookie-sophomore format where it's like a rookie team versus a sophomore team, or maybe they do a bit of a weird draft as well, with like some of the top leading reserve. Yeah, there's some ways they can mix up the formula a little bit, but just to answer your question, to get back to it, I think like Hunter and Johnson make sense. I know Harrow, a lot of people like to thumb their nose at him, but he's a legitimately good player for the Heat, and he's kind of exceeded a lot of expectations, mine included. But no, this is a pretty solid team for the U.S. It's just, I think Johnson and Hunter are my two picks. How about you?
I think it's Johnson, and I could go with Wiseman as well. I think the Edwards one is the one where I'm a little like, okay. Wiseman's been hurt a bunch. He has not had a remarkable rookie year. I think Garland's impacted the game a little bit. Like I could have, but here's the, like, people that are like, Darius has been better than Anthony Edwards this year. Here's the thing. This game, just like the All-Star game, is about like getting eyeballs. It is about drawing attention. And I'm not saying this is perfect. I don't really, because it's not really how I prefer to think about these things. But when you look at this is one of those things where it's like, okay, like these are the guys that were high draft picks that has some name value. Like Halliburton, has been like one of the standout rookies this year. LaMelo obviously is the odds-on favorite for rookie of the year. Someone like Anthony Edwards had probably the NBA highlight of the year when he absolutely wrecked Yuta Watanabe with a dunk and like started a whole dumb discourse about fun versus analytics again. Like he single-handedly ruined Twitter for about 3 days.
And that's a result of like does plenty to ruin itself to begin with.
Yes. So I don't have like I don't these things don't like get me really like hot under the collar. I understand that they mean something to the players. I don't know if this is something that like Darius is gonna like look at as like, oh, they snubbed me 2 years in a row. Yeah, and like last year, it's like, okay, dude, you were not that good last year. Like that is what it is.
And he admits he wasn't good last year.
Yeah, but it's like we've discussed this a lot. Like there are very logical reasons why he wasn't very good. But I think you look at this and it's like, okay, like I think Keldon Johnson, you can make an argument. I think Wiseman, you can make an argument. Like I think there are cases, but it's also just like I still think Darius is really good. This is not one of those things where it's like when we get to the end of his career, it's going to be like, make or break thing for him was not making that Rising Stars game in year 2, making the roster. Like you're not going to remember this a year from now. Like you're just not.
No, you're not. And like you said, it's an all-star type format is either you're a really exciting scoring player or an exciting player in general. Like let's look at the list again. LaMelo Ball is an exciting player. Anthony Edwards may not score a lot and he may be inefficient, but he's so explosive.
Anthony Edwards is gonna throw on so many dunks.
Yeah, it's going to be like Tim Hardaway Jr. versus Deion Waiters a few years ago, where it's like Anthony Edwards versus R.J. Barrett, or maybe like Alexander Walker,
or like when one of the first big Kyrie moments, way back when like life. Yes, that was like when that was on Tumblr at that point. That's how old I am. And it was like getting shared on Tumblr a bunch. Like it was one of those things where it's like
still not as old as Campazzo, but proceed.
Yeah, thank God. But we're in this position where I that's all this is, and I think Darius could be fun in it. Like I if he matters to him, then I empathize with him and wanting to get the respect on his name and whatever. But like these things are kind of goofy to me.
Yeah, it's kind of silly. I know people will get offended because maybe it's not your favorite player, but like let's also look at it this way. I'm counting it now: 1, 2, 3. 4-ish teams are from small markets. I know the NBA really wants New Orleans to be a thing. Like Golden State's a premier market, Denver's a contender, Memphis is a smaller market, Atlanta's big, and Miami's big. But like, there's some smaller market teams. Like 2 Thunder players made it too, and like 2 Wizards players made it too. Like those are teams that nobody really thinks about, other than unless you're a local fan. Like I think this is a good marketing opportunity for not just international players, just in general, but players that maybe you don't get to see a lot of either. Like Tyrese Halliburton is really, really fun. And I think he is more than deserving over Darius Garland, because here's my hot take of the day. If you held a gun to my head, I'd take Tyrese Halliburton over Darius Garland on the Cavs any day of the week. And maybe you agree or disagree with me on that, but this is just good exposure for a lot of smaller teams that maybe these are like some rising stars that you don't really get to hear a lot about. And I mean, like you hear a lot about Harrow, Edwards, and Ball. I mean, you're going to hear a lot more about Johnson, Hunter, Halliburton, and so on.
Anthony Edwards was the number 1 pick. James Wiseman was the number 2 overall pick in this year's draft.
His family is so famous.
Well, and he's really good, and he's going to win Rookie of the Year. And also, just like, honestly, the big snub here is Lamar Stevens. Like, where's respect for Lamar Stevens?
Where is
the respect?
Your check's clearing.
Yeah, Bill is wiring money to my Cash App right now. But I just, these things are just like,
it's silly.
Don't know. Like I get why people want to see their favorite teams represented, and if it matters to Darius, then like I can empathize with him wanting to get the respect. Frankly, probably as long as I don't know if any of these guys are like going on vacation during this, and hopefully for COVID protocol's sake, they're just gonna like chill for the week and go work out at the facility. Yeah, like just
play some Xbox.
But like you're not going to Atlanta. Like you're not doing what, like Triple H impressions he was doing. I saw.
That was fun. He's doing the Triple H impression for practice today. Probably get some Fortnite in, or whatever the kids are streaming these days. I don't know anymore, but
Yeah, and we're so old. Evan,
yeah.
I have one last thing. So I did a radio hit on Wednesday, and it got asked about Colin Sexton's All-Star candidacy in the great city at the great station up in Toledo. That I did this radio hit. So, like, basically, it's like Colin Sexton, like, is it like a thing that he didn't make the All-Star game? And I keep thinking about this because people could be like, I've been asked about this a bunch, and I'm just like, no. And I again, like, I don't know if this is just me being like no fun or whatever, but it's just like I just am like I just keep all I think about is Mike Conley's never made an All-Star game, and I'm just like I can't get worked over about this if like Mike Conley like never makes an All-Star game. You know what I mean? These things are tricky, and then when you have 12 players, and it's just like these things are hard. And I think if you're a fan and you're like Darius should be in this, like okay, then you know that like you're watching the Cavs, like that's all that really matters ultimately. You know?
Yeah. No,
I'm sure
agree.
the Cavs. I mean, the Cavs know it. I'm sure the Cavs are probably the cat. Like I would like my guy, but can't control it.
Yeah, you can't control it. A lot of it is also just national attention too, and the fact that the Cavs are kind of irrelevant when 2-3 isn't in the building anymore on a night-to-night basis. It's just the harsh reality of it. Even in Cleveland as well, like they play third fiddle to the Indians and the Browns on a day-to-day basis when LeBron isn't here either. But I think Colin not making it is a shame. Yeah, it's a shame he didn't make it, but I think him being considered is a nice thing to be. The fans should be happy with to begin with, and the fact that maybe his star is starting to rise a little bit, and he's starting to get that national attention he deserves. But I don't know. Maybe he'll get a little bit more momentum next year. But I talked to Colin about this. He doesn't really care. I mean, he'll personally probably take it as a slight that he didn't get in, but he would rather have the team be in playoff position. And we talk about the good and the bad in a little bit, but that's one thing that might be a little good and surprising about this Cavs team. But I think Colin would rather have a team achievement than an individual one this year, and I think maybe that's just how he operates.
Yeah. All right, Evan. Let's dive into the good and the bad here. So we have some things we could dive into on both fronts. We haven't prepared each other for this. We're just going to roll into this. Do you want to start good or do you want to start bad? I think we should. Personally, I would like to start positive. I'm trying to bring those good vibes here.
Let's bring some good vibes in, and I think one of my surprises for the Cavs this year, and a good thing, is they've kind of exceeded my expectations even. I wrote about this for Forbes, but Shane Young had them projected to win 20 games total in this shortened season, so they'd be going 20-52 in a 72-game season, and they are 4 games ahead of that so far, so they're on path to win 28, and that's even with an injury-ravaged roster for the first half of the year. And it's just, I think a lot of it has to go to having stability at coaching with JV Bickerstaff, but also this young core is looking really, really good when you have to kind of throw them to the wolves a little bit, at Coro especially, and even bringing Jared Allen in as well and making him just kind of the part of the future is just a big thing. Like this Cavs team's just exceeded my expectations. Have they exceeded yours?
Yeah, I think so. I think they're frisky in a way that I expected. I think it's a little. Some of the stuff with it is a little underwhelming because like how the Andre Drummond situation played out. Like obviously not having Larry Nance and Kevin Love is a huge blow to what this team can kind of do. But I think they have I'm very sure that they're not going to be like a play-in tournament team. Like I feel very confident in just sort of like thinking, okay, this team is going to stay frisky for the whole season. But like the odds of them being a play-in tournament team to me are still pretty low. I just don't know if I quite see that for them this year. But like, I don't think they're as bad in some ways that you might have thought. And I think like it's because like Sexton has taken a leap. He just played one of the best games of his career last week. I think Darius Garland is and against Houston, I thought he was very, very good as well. I think like Darius has had one of the biggest leaps of any player on this team. And I'm like watching the beginning of this Pacers game right now. He's already thrown 2 lobs a year down. Like that chemistry that they have there with that pick and roll combination is already like really, really potent, and it's a really strong development. And that leads into my positive that I think the Cavs actually have some real pieces. I think you could have come into this year and said like, okay, the only guy that I'm like pretty sure is like a player is Colin Sexton. I feel like right now that they have 4 guys that I'm like pretty sure are like good NBA players, can hang in a rotation. We'll see how good they can ultimately get. I still think they're missing that lead big creator. I think that's why Cade or Kuminga or someone could be really interesting on this team come next year. And I still think we're going to learn more about Isaac Okoro. We're still going to learn more about Garland and Sexton. And there's still stuff for these guys to do. We're going to learn more about Jared Allen. We'll see if, he ends up extending his range in some meaningful way or whatever. But
really, I look at this team about him taking threes.
It's on my list and just haven't had a chance to yet. But I look at this. I think this team has real pieces. I think Okoro does a lot of really positive stuff on the court. I think that Darius has taken a huge leap as a player this year. I think Sexton's legit. I think this team has real pieces, and I think that is for a team that when they've not had LeBron the last 20 years, they've been mostly pretty bad. And when the times they've been able to get pieces, like like if you think about the era between the LeBron eras, so you get Kyrie and you get Tristan, but you miss on the Dion pick, you miss on the Bennett pick pretty badly.
Oh yeah.
I don't know if any of these guys are going to end up being as good as Kyrie. That would be sort of even like Sexton. I don't know if he's going to get to that level, but you have four.
Unrealistic.
Kyrie's really good.
That's unrealistic.
But I think all the guys you have now are pieces, and I think you have the semblance of something that, like, you continue building smartly, you handle this roster correctly, you have something here in a way that I think is quite interesting if they can kind of handle them. The next couple steps are going to be fascinating for me in the sense.
No, they really are. It really depends on how the draft lottery goes for them. If they don't make the play-in, if they don't make the playoffs, they get a lottery pick, and it depends on how that shakes up for them as well. I think right now where they're sitting, it's still in that 5 range or so. They might be 5 or 6 depending on that win over Houston. I haven't really checked in the last few days, but they're currently 7th. My apologies, but so they're just ahead of Washington and Sacramento for that 5 through 7 range, and I think that's where Cleveland will kind of be thriving, quote unquote, for a little bit this year, and that's where they'll be sticking. I know they'll get healthier with Kevin Love, Matthew Dellavedova, and Larry Nance coming back after the All-Star break, but no, I think the Cavs are just in a good place, and to quote Drax, they don't have dudes. You and I are dudes, Chris. They have some men on this roster. I know it doesn't really stick as well here, but no, they have some legitimate pieces. I think it really does start with Colin Sexton as a cultural guy and just really surpassing everybody's expectations as a basketball player overall, just in terms of offensive ability and especially shooting. And then Darius Garland's looked really sharp, like you said. Isaac Okoro is highly impactful as a rookie. He's not a box score impact, but like you watch him on the floor, like he's making tangible impacts on positive impacts on both sides of the floor. But Chris, I think there's the biggest bright spot for me is just the Cavs getting Jared Allen in this first half of the year. Like they tried it with Andre Drummond. Apparently Allen is a player that they coveted for the longest time, and then they're able to get him for Dante Exum in a future first via Milwaukee, which I think it conveys next year, if I remember correctly. But no, J.A. has been, or Frohio, buy a shirt if you haven't yet. You can check it out on Twitter or anywhere else that you can find it. But no, Jared Allen has been an awesome addition for the Cavs, and I have the game pulled up as well as we're recording, and he's shredding Indiana already with 4 points, and like he's a solid pick and roll lob partner with Darius Garland, and I think he has a little bit of chemistry with Sexton as well, and like Allen is just showing a lot of interesting wrinkles in terms of spacing and playmaking, and like it's not just defensive ability or the fact that he's a rim rolling lob threat every single night, but like he's just been such a pleasant surprise. And Chris, let's just get you on the record on this, because I think you've said this a few times now, or at least alluded to it. Do you think he's the best player in Cleveland's young core right now?
I waver between thinking this sometimes. I thought
it between
him
and Sexton.
Yeah, it is. I think Darius could like end up getting there. As I've said on the show before, I've talked to some people in the league who put it like a 65. I had one person in the league tell me there's a 65-35 chance that Garland is being better than Sexton when they both kind of hit their peaks. And I thought that was kind of interesting. I think Jared Allen we did this whole series last summer at Fear of the Sword where you and I wrote about team needs. And I remember like the rim protection one is the one that I probably was like most fascinated with, because I watched so much like Yusuf Nurkic film and how he supports the McCollum Lillard partnership. And I don't think Allen's Nurkic, because Nurkic is like a pretty good passer. He's a little burlier. Allen's got a little more of that verticality kind of lob threat to him, but like it is that, yeah, like Allen has this ability to him that I think is just perfect for what you're kind of trying to build here. And even if like long-term, the Sexton Garland partnership is not everything the Cavs kind of hope it can be, he can be the backbone of a really strong, stout defensive unit for a long time. I think he's going to be whatever you pay him this summer within reason. I think he's going to be worth it. I think an absolute coup to get him. I would like all the focus on that trade obviously goes into Harden because it's Harden and like the Nets have an unstoppable offense now. I would read a lot about how the Cavs are the team that ended up with Jared Allen, because it's an absolute coup to get him. And like, Houston obviously has Christian Wood, so they weren't going to be in a market for him. but
Yeah.
I absolutely coup getting him. I think you're dead right that this is one of the things. Evan, do you have any final quick hitting positives? I have two really short ones that I want to just shout out.
Just the Cavs have stability at the coaching position. Like I said before, JB Bickerstaff is the coach for the Cavs right now, and I think for the future as well. He's a leader in the locker room and on the floor as well for them. He's a coach that the players love quite a bit. And to say the Cavs have stability at the coaching position is refreshing. Colin Sexton's been through 4 in his 3 years in his NBA career, so it's just kind of nice to see that there's a little stability there, and I think that's a huge positive as well. And we're starting to see the benefits of having him over John Beilein still.
Yes. All right. Two quick ones for me. Number one, I think ultimately that the Drummond situation played out how it just had to play out. I don't think this is necessarily like a positive in terms of like I don't empathize with Andre Drummond, but I think it just they handled that correctly ultimately, I think, and kind of figuring that out. And number two, I think this team's ability to just bounce back from things like 10-game losing streaks and like go on like a little winning streak here is something that tells you something to me about the team's DNA. And it's cliche and everything, but that to me is important. All right, Evan, let's get into a little bit of the negatives. I'll go first because I'll be the Debbie Downer here. My first negative is just that this team's defense ultimately isn't as good as it appeared to be early in the season. And I never thought it was going to remain like the best in the league or top 5 or whatever. But it has cratered since then. Non-engaged Drummond is kind of was a problem. No Larry Nance, how well he was playing is a real bummer. And I think for how much emphasis they put on that, they're definitely more competent. They definitely try harder. I think they're more coherent on that end of the floor. So, some of the little gimmicks they were doing, like zone out of timeouts, I think teams have done enough scouting now where they're like they've sort of figured that out and know how to navigate that and know what the Cavs are probably going to do in those situations. And you're seeing guys like even Okoro, who I think is already who's got all the tools and the intangibles and things to be a really, really good defensive player. He's taking his lumps because he's a 20-year-old rookie defending Devin Booker and James Harden and name your best player on every team, like pretty much every single night out. But I think this team's defense just regressing is a bit of a downer because I think they really were emphasizing that, maybe even more so than the offense in a lot of ways. And I think that has been a reason why, like when the season really turned a little bit and they went on that losing streak, I think the defense was a pretty significant reason why that kind of just cratered a little bit.
Yeah, no, I think that it really is. You really did go low for the negative there, but
it's just like the thing that was like are they this frisky defensive team, and then like it just sort of like that.
I still think they're frisky and competitive, but I just think the rest of the league's caught up, like you said, and I also just think the injuries have really taken their toll because other than Okoro, Larry Nance is probably the Cavs' best. Between Okoro and Allen, like Larry Nance is a little bit of a hybrid of those two in terms of just like a little bit of everything. Like Larry Nance is the life force of this Cavs defense, and having him just kind of dealing with injury so much has really snagged them a bit. Like they were top 5 at this point. They were 21st in overall defensive rating heading into Wednesday's matchup against the Indiana Pacers. So yeah, they're
just a titch below league average, which is a thing. And the other thing that I will note to their credit, because I'm trying to be a little more holistic in the year 2021, as Evan can attest to. But they're yes, they are top 10 over the last 2 weeks according to Cleveland Glass, and I'll tell you exactly where they are. Because I'm trying to look at this with a half page because this is modern technology, folks. But they are top 10 over the last 2 weeks, and they are above average during that stretch. So that's like a very impressive thing. If they're 11th, just outside the top 10, but 2.5 points per 100 possessions better than league average on defense over that stretch. So like maybe somewhat that stretch where they're getting up like 130 points per 100 possessions was something of an aberration.
Do you think a lot of that is because Jared Allen finally got the start over Andre Drummond and they told Drummond to go home?
I think some of it is just like you got out of that road trip.
That's true too. That was a brutal trip for the Cavs.
I think it's somewhat the Drummond thing, but I also just think like you get out of that road trip and you just can reset the vibes a little bit. And that road trip was just like absolutely brutal. The amount of really, really good teams that they were playing over that stretch was just like night after night. They're to get their teeth kicked in. And I think at a certain point they just needed to get home and kind of reset things a little bit. But all right, Evan, what's your first negative here?
Well, it's just really the injuries have just kind of taken their toll on the Cavs. Like Matthew Dellavedova and Dante Exum for a bit, but mostly Delvado at this point. Like, the Cavs could really use a backup point guard whenever Garland sits. And I know Sexton, they're trying to play at the point, but I just don't think it's really a realistic thing. And I think it's just a smart move to put a true point guard next to him, and you can't play Darius 48 minutes. So that's a problem. Kevin Love being out almost the entire season. He played a game in a couple minutes at this point. He played way too much against Detroit and barely played against Philadelphia when he reactivated his calf.
I really should have rested that Monday game against Philly. Really should have just rested that game, I think.
Yep. And him being out, I think, is just kind of really holding this Cavs team back a little bit offensively. Like, we complain about them not taking enough threes. Naturally, Kevin Love would get 6 to 8 threes a night in this Cavs offense because somebody's got to take them. And I think that would help Isaac Okoro's game. He pairs beautifully in theory alongside Jared Allen, and I still think he would in execution as well. He makes Garland and Sexton better. Kevin Love just makes his team better overall, and like, he's an underappreciated player to begin with, and I think the Cavs fans will appreciate him more when Kevin Love is eventually gone, whether it's through trade or when he signs his next contract to finish out his career somewhere else. But like, that's a big thing too. Like, and then Larry Nance, like I mentioned, he is the heart and soul of this team on both ends of the floor, especially on defense, and losing him to injuries and just such freak times has just kind of been unfortunate for this Cavs team. Like you said, it's admirable that they weathered this massive storm of adversity and just kind of still are out there with their heads up high. Like, that's really admirable. But having Nance, having Dellavedova, and having Love would be huge. And like, they are going to get them back in the second half of the season. But having them more available in the first half, we'd probably be having a different conversation about this Cavs team. But we also might be having a different conversation about the growth of this young core as well. Because this young core is already impressive, but there was potential to be even more impressive if this team was able to stay healthy. And just an unfortunate reality of, I think, being 9 months away, not playing actual meaningful basketball, and having to go right back in it. And the fact that Kevin Love's on the wrong side of 30 and he's just injury prone, and that's just unfortunate.
The injury things are a real concern. I think Larry was having one of his best seasons, if not his best, before the injury. Career high in 3-point attempts, developed into a real shooter. Was it for a time leading the league in steals and deflections? Was just playing really engaged, handsy defensive basketball, and it was quite impressive. I think Kevin, everything you said about Kevin to me is exactly true. I think with, I think the backup point guard is also just like a really big thing. I think, like Dante Exum looked really good. Lest we forget how good Dante Exum looked.
Dante Exum had a career best game and then suffered an injury the following day, or like during that game and was out.
I remember talking to someone with the Jazz and a member of Jazz media as well, about him over the summer. And I was talking with them about how, or not over the summer, over like the break. It wasn't the summer. My seasons, during this time were confused. But he was talking about like working on like landing on the correct foot and like all kinds of mechanical stuff to help him avoid injury. And they're like, hey, he's been saying that for 3 years and he's just snake bitten. I really empathize with Dante. He seems like a really nice dude. And I would just, for his sake, I would really just like him to be able to stay healthy, because I think there's the makings of a useful NBA player in there. Injuries is, I think, very clearly a big one. I think that 10-game losing streak also has to be included in here, because that was difficult to watch. There was very little positive you could take away from a lot of those games. Like even a game where like Kawhi and PG rest for the Clippers, you don't pick up a win there, and you just kind of got your teeth kicked in that one too. And it's just like, what are we doing here? Mm-hmm. In a lot of senses. I'll say my last negative. The Drummond thing is somewhat of a negative too, because like again, like that situation. My last negative. That situation 100%. That situation just needed to end a little cleaner. I think ultimately, like, both parties will be happy to break up, and as I said before, but I think like the way it played out probably could have been a little bit better. I think the other one is that I think the Cavs have to figure something out here with Cedi Osman, because I do not know exactly what has happened with him. I don't think he's been the player they hoped. I think something's just a little off, and I think either maybe there's a trade to happen, or maybe he just kind of figures some stuff out. But I think him not being sort of what they hoped and ultimately developed into is sort of at a point now where it's sort of like, okay, we got to figure out how to kind of either make this work or go in a different direction. I think that's kind of where you're at with Cedi, and that's unfortunate for a guy whose skill set I think could be really useful for filling in some of the needs that Cavs do have if he's playing a little more under control sometimes.
All the Turkish Locked On Cavs fans and the Cedi Osman stands that are daily in my mentions, I hope you were not listening to that part. But yeah, Cedi Osman is probably one of the most polarizing players on Cleveland's roster, other than how fans feel about Colin Sexton versus Darius Garland, which is still like the weirdest discourse
and
Cavs fandom,
people's like Kevin Love stuff. Like it's just silly.
yeah, that Kevin Love stuff's been lingering ever since he first came here when LeBron came back,
Just,
and it's just people are weird. The Cavs fans are weird. Like I don't know how else to say it, but I'm weird too. I'm a fan of this team as well, and I used to have some of those takes too, but I've grown up. But either way, yeah, just my last negative really is the Andre Drummond thing. Like it was clear when Jared Allen came here that this Cavs team was better whenever he played. I know JB Bickerstaff said that there wasn't any animosity between those two, and there probably wasn't, but there was a clear indicator that Drummond was not playing as well and not giving full effort when Jared Allen arrived, especially when Kobe Albin tapped him at Jared Allen as the franchise's center of the future, and he quite literally said it's better to have him in-house when it comes to free agency, so they have an easier time. One, because he's a restricted free agent, they have his bird rights, and we can go over that some other time, but it was an ugly divorce towards the end. I think JB Bickerstaff and his staff and the Cavs front office really tried their best to make it work and try and just find some harmonious balance where they can up Drummond's trade value and try and find him a partner. But like you said, it's for the best. They sent him home. I don't know if he's with the team or not. He posted a video on Instagram the other day where they were celebrating Lamar Stevens' game-winning dunk, and it was from his phone, so he still might be with the team. But he may be more in the background at this point. But I've jokingly said it's refreshing not to think about Andre anymore, but I do feel for him. I think he wanted to make this work in Cleveland, but it just didn't work out. And Chris, as we wrap this up, let me ask you this, and we'll talk about this more as we get ready for the trade deadline. How do you think this Drummond situation ends? Do you think he's bought out, or do you think he's traded?
I think a trade happens because I think for him financially, I just think you're going to get a second round pick and some money back for him. I think
he's going to get bought out. I just don't think anyone's really going to kick the tires on somebody making $29 million when they can get him for way less.
I just think ultimately like something happens because I just think like it's one of those things where if I'm him, I'm really hoping I get traded just from a financial sense. That's just like, again, because if he gets bought out, like it becomes really hard for him to kind of make a significant amount of money next summer. And I think he would very much like to get one more pretty large contract and secure as much of the bag as possible. And I'm pro players securing the bag all the time. Evan, I'll say one other thing negative, and we don't need to go into it, but I just think how the Kevin Porter Jr. era played out also pretty big.
Yeah, that's also another thing that's just kind of like left my mind after he left Cleveland. I think I do it to troll a lot of our listeners and people who follow me. Like I'll retweet his highlights or like he won G League Player of the Week or the bubble.
My favorite thing is when Rockets Twitter like puts videos of Harden and him side by side and are like they're the same, and I'm just like y'all are weird. Rockets and Houston sports Twitter. Houston and also TJ McConnell has 3 steals against the Cavs in the last like 2 minutes, so that's pretty bad. That's pretty bad. He's just hitting. He's doing some prime deli stuff right there.
So speaking of best member of the young core, are both of them. Sexton has 2 points, 4 assists, and Jared Allen has 11 points and 2 boards. So I think, Chris, we need to get out of here and watch this game. I think we have a good one brewing in Cleveland to wrap up the season. Is there anything you want to say for the fine folks at WKYC or at home who are maybe listening to us before we go?
Yeah, we'll be back for the full half of the second season. I'm personally excited for a little bit of a break, but we're going to be doing a ton of fun stuff here and diving into it. Check out the coverage that Ben Axelrod and the whole team are doing at WKYC as well. And look, man, you can only read so many NFL mock drafts. Why not watch actual sports?
Yeah, no, the Cavs are a fun team. You should be checking them out. And as always, give us a 5-star review on iTunes if you haven't yet. If you're checking us out on WKYC, we're available 5 days a week wherever you get your podcasts. So we really appreciate your support. We appreciate WKYC making this partnership to continue happen. And we'll be back soon. We'll be back. There'll be a twofer this week or today with episodes. We'll be talking with Pacers Indy Cornrows writer Mark Schindler about the game against the Pacers and kind of some of the stuff he's worked with us on. So until next time, go Cavs.